What about in terms of growing the economy here, especially some of the business areas where we've been sort of flat in this area in terms of manufacturing, in terms of all that growth? What does your party plan to do to spur economic growth in this region, especially in terms of good, sustainable jobs in this area?
Right. I think we need to seriously develop plans to entice business from the large urban areas. You are not going to even out the population unless you can do that. So we have so much land in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington that we could certainly make it affordable for many businesses to come here and build and grow without destroying the ecosystem. And I think that's a big key. There's a lot of people that are worried that, we're going to disrupt our ecosystems and our forests, and we don't have to do that. We have 9,200 square kilometers, some of it very sparsely populated. We need to entice business to come, but that becomes all-encompassing. We have to be able to provide accommodation. We have to be able to provide the people who are willing to relocate here.
And just to continue following that up, it is, as you said, it's a largely rural area. There's lots of space, but there's also a lot of traditional agricultural revenue from that. How do you balance the traditional way of living off the land with that idea of bringing in some new industry and new revenue?
As I told you, I prefer to be called seasoned. So I probably fall into that traditional category. However, change is not always a bad thing, but it has to be planned out appropriately. You can't just throw an Amazon building in the middle of Maynooth, which is north of Bancroft. It has to be planned out, and it has to be organized, and you have to make sure that you'll have enough staff that are capable of managing those businesses. Now, if it's lumber and you're up in that area, you will have unlimited staffing capabilities. I think people need to look forward to change. We have a lot of people who have, lack of better words, they're immigrants from the urban centers. They came out this way. They understand the importance of that. And I think once people realize that if we do this appropriately and without spending millions on red tape studies, that it's only going to help this riding grow.
What does your party plan to do to ensure we have economic growth in this region?
Absolutely. The number one thing is to keep on investing in our infrastructure. By doing that, and by spreading those investments across the entire province into each of the small communities as well as the large communities, having those investments take place means that there's construction jobs, means that there's trades jobs, means that all of these people are working. And in doing that, those people that are working are also out buying pizza and buying groceries and gasoline and all of the things that keep our economy rolling for everyone. So these infrastructure investments, the biggest infrastructure investments in the province's history, coming out of the budget that was just dropped by Premier Ford, right, is an important factor, is the direction to go to improve our overall economy and improve everyone's prosperity.
There's a growing push for clean energy and greener jobs. Do you plan on doing anything to bring green jobs to the riding?
Well, as you know, in my neighboring riding, Minister Todd Smith is the Minister of Energy, and this government has worked a great deal towards the small nuclear projects and a number of other green energy investments. We know and we believe that we need more green energy, and we need to improve our overall grid structures. And in doing that, we need to make sure that it's done in a balanced way. Right? In previous governments, unfortunately, they bought into contracts for green energy where we were paying, in some cases, 10 times as much to produce the energy as that we're selling it to the consumers. That's not sustainable. So we need to have a green energy model that works so that our our own hydro prices don't skyrocket again. Right? So overall, we need more energy. We need green energy, and this government has put huge efforts towards the electric vehicle and the battery industry. These types of projects will continue under the Doug Ford government.
The other side of the affordability question is the economy itself. What do you plan to do to ensure we have economic growth in the region, or how can the Provincial Party stimulate economic growth in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington specifically?
Well, this is a really, really, really big thing because the Ford government, their mindset, their whole issue is to invest in the GTA. That is front and center. Building the 413, $10 billion into expressways in the GTA that only reward rich developers already. It's just not right. We need to invest in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington. We need to invest in infrastructure in our towns. And the reality is that the Ford government has failed. Their investments in our community have been minimal, beyond the normal, grants to municipalities. But by and large, they've cut back. They've cut back in education. They've cut back in healthcare, and they've not provided the amount of money necessary to support our small towns and our rural villages in terms of providing basics like infrastructure.
Now, you have a background in healthcare, so how would you like to see the way that healthcare is supported in a smaller community like Hastings, Lennox, and Addington change that?
So we absolutely need to support specific grants to to enable small hospitals like we have in Bancroft and Napanee to thrive, to do well. We need to relook at how we integrate primary care and our smaller hospitals and our family health teams and our community health centers. We need to figure out a way to bring services together so that, for example, a woman who needs a mammogram should be able to get that in Bancroft. They shouldn't have to travel to Belleville to get something like a basic diagnostic procedure or a screening procedure like a mammogram. There's no reason why we can't do that. The reality is that there's been incentives more to the private sector, and my deepest concern is that we're going to see continued emphasis on the part of the Ford government to privatize and incent for-profit healthcare. We need to support our existing hospitals and our existing community health centers, family health teams, so they can provide the services locally, not in a distant center.
The question of affordability and the economy are a big issue. It's always a big issue during an election, but specifically here. What does your party plan to do to make sure that there is economic growth? There are jobs there, but there's either too few people to fill them or not enough skilled people to fill them. What is your plan or your party's plan to make sure that with so many jobs available, how to get those workers there?
That's a really good question. One thing that we hear from business owners and farmers even across the board is reducing red tape. I was speaking with a farmer last week that says that if he could afford it, he could literally hire one person to deal with all the forms and paperwork that he has to fill out. And a lot of it is basically crossing boundaries. So for example, he'll fill out 40 pages for Stats Canada, but then he'll have to fill out the same kind of thing for some kind of provincial request on the same issue. There's many ways that we can sort of consolidate information across levels of government and save people on the red tape. But beyond that, we also need to get the housing market under control. That's one major thing that can be done. In terms of getting more business out into our riding, Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, one thing that hasn't been done before from a provincial perspective is regional tax credits. There's always incentivizing small business or other incentives that the tax code has from a provincial perspective. We want to change that up. So we're having regional credits to encourage people not to just settle from a corporate perspective in the GTA all the time. We want to start seeing head offices out here. We want to see more manufacturing out here in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington. So that's something that we would do as well. I mentioned delivering a balanced budget, which I think, again, is important. The less money going into the government's hands means the more money circulating in the economy. That's another important thing that we would do as well.
Where would the money come from for the regional tax credits?
That's a really good question. The fact is that the government has a budget to play with, and they can determine where it goes. So it's possible maybe that we would literally slide the scale down for companies that want to settle in what we determine to be ideal locations. So, for example, underdeveloped areas, and maybe slide the scale up if they want to go to areas that already have plenty of business. So that's a perfect example of how you could shuttle more businesses to other areas of the province that need more development.
Just to clarify, you say slide the scale down. Is that a form of the market's control?
When I say slide the scale down, I simply mean cut the tax rates for a company that wants to come to Hastings, Lennox, and Addington as opposed to, say, Toronto. Because frankly, the average company wants to go to Toronto, wants to go to Mississauga. Especially with the digital economy now, we have the capacity to have our workforce working remotely. We have a lot of capacity here in this riding for companies to come here, but they just don't know about us. And typically in the past, it's up to municipalities to provide tax breaks to companies, but they have a lot less leeway than the province does in terms of providing incentives. So I think we need to help out local municipalities attract businesses to their areas.
Well, our third question is that the other side of the affordability question is the economy, and we kind of touched on it a bit there. What does your party plan to do to ensure we have economic growth in the Hastings, Lennox, and Addington region?
Well, economic growth comes in many forms. There are many green jobs that need to be promoted. We're facing a climate crisis. It's been declared as such by the federal government, and then the silence about that is deafening. So we need green jobs. We have a few green jobs that are happening in a place like Napanee. We've got a place called Bag to Earth, which is making recyclable bags for many purposes. So there are lots of opportunities for retrofits. We need programs that will help people retrofit their homes to save energy. We need a transition to electric cars. There are many jobs that are available in that area all over Ontario from mining of the raw materials to building the cars to installing charging stations. So there are thousands of well-paying jobs that must be available and that governments have to help make available so that people can have the new green type of jobs instead of the old brown type of jobs, which are causing more problems. The Ford government says, let's get people back to work by building highways. What are we going to do? We're going to put more cars on the road, creating more greenhouse gas. That's absolutely the wrong direction for this economy. We need a new green economy, and we can be a world leader in green products for a green future. So this is really necessary for us to get to. We can't let this go. The Ford government and the Liberals before them ran out the clock on the climate. Remember when we had 10 years to fix our climate problems, or else they would just get out of control? Well, the Ford government has wasted 4 of those 10 years, so now we only have 6 left. So let's get to it. Let's get on to building the green economy, creating thousands of green jobs for people to build their lives around.
Yeah, and the economic issues that people are talking about all tie back to inflation as well. Mm-hmm. So are there any strategies or anything that you'll implement if the NDP gets in power in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington? Well,
we talked about gas prices, and we have a plan for that. Also, the way of we want to build more government services that will help people with affordability. It'll actually put money back in people's pockets. So mental health services, dental services. We are talking about a dental care plan so that people will, that'll put money back in the pockets of people. Or alternatively, people that can never afford to have their teeth fixed will now get that, and they will have an improvement in their health. So there'll be less demand for the rest of the healthcare system because people will not have the secondary problems that arise from not having your teeth looked after. So these are things that are going to save people money and help with affordable living.